Privilege. Delivered at the Sesame Club, London. Two forces seem to be working throughout nature. One of these is constantly differentiating, and the other is as constantly unifying. The one making more and more for separate individuals, the other, as it were, bringing the individuals into a mass, bringing out sameness in the midst of all this differentiation. It seems that the action of these two forces enters into every department of nature and of human life. On the physical plane, we always find the two forces most distinctly at work, separating the individuals, making them more and more distinct from other individuals, and again making them into species and classes, and bringing out similarities of expressions and form. The same holds good as regards the social life of man. Since the time when society began, these two forces have been at work, differentiating and unifying. Their action appears in various forms and is called by various names in different places and at different times. But the essence is present in all, one making for differentiation and the other for sameness, the one making for caste and the other breaking it down, one making for classes and privileges and the other destroying them. The whole universe seems to be the battleground of these two forces. On the one hand, it is urged that though this unifying process exists, we ought to resist it with all our might, because it leads towards death, that perfect unity is perfect annihilation, and that when the differentiating process that is at work in this universe ceases, the universe comes to an end. It is differentiation that causes the phenomena that are before us. Unification would reduce them all to a homogeneous and lifeless matter. Such a thing, of course, mankind wants to avoid. The same argument is applied to all the things and facts that we see around us. It is urged that even in physical body and social classification, absolute sameness would produce natural death and social death. Absolute sameness of thought and feeling would produce mental decay and degeneration. Sameness, therefore, is to be avoided. This has been the argument on the one side, and it has been urged in every country and in various times, with only a change of language. Practically, it is the same argument which is urged by the Brahmins of India when they want to uphold the divisions and castes, when they want to uphold the privileges of a certain portion of the community against everybody else. The destruction of caste, they declare, would lead to destruction of society, and boldly they produce the historical fact that theirs has been the longest lived society. So they, with some show of force, appeal to this argument. With some show of authority, they declare that that alone which makes the individual live the longest life must certainly be better than that which produces shorter lives. On the other hand, the idea of oneness has had its advocates throughout all times. From the days of the Upanishads, the Buddhas, and Christ, and all other great preachers of religion, down to our present day, in the new political aspirations, and in the claims of the oppressed and the downtrodden, and of all those who find themselves bereft of privileges, comes out the one assertion of this unity and sameness. But human nature asserts itself. Those who have an advantage want to keep it, and if they find an argument, however one-sided and crude, they must cling to it. This applies to both sides. Applied to metaphysics, this question also assumes another form. The Buddhist declares that we need not look for anything which brings unity in the midst of these phenomena. We ought to be satisfied with this phenomenal world. This variety is the essence of life, however miserable and weak it may seem to be. We can have nothing more. The Vedantist declares that unity is the only thing that exists. Variety is but phenomenal, ephemeral, and apparent. Look not to variety, says the Vedantist. Go back to unity. Avoid unity, it is a delusion, says the Buddhist. Go to variety. The same differences of opinion in religion and metaphysics have come down to our own day, for in fact the sum total of the principles of knowledge is very small. Metaphysics and metaphysical knowledge, religion and religious knowledge, reached their culmination 5,000 years ago, and we are merely reiterating the same truths in different languages, only enriching them sometimes by the accession of fresh illustrations. So this is the fight, even today. One side wants us to keep to the phenomenal, to all this variation, and points out, with great show of argument, that variation has to remain, for when that stops, everything is gone. What we mean by life has been caused by variation. The other side, at the same time, valiantly points to unity. Coming to ethics, we find a tremendous departure. It is perhaps the only science which makes a bold departure from this fight. For ethics is unity, its basis is love. It will not look at this variation. The one aim of ethics is this unity, this sameness. The highest ethical codes that mankind has discovered up to the present time know no variation. They have no time to stop to look into it. Their one end is to make for that sameness. The Indian mind, being more analytical, I mean the Vedantic mind, found this unity as the result of all its analyses and wanted to base everything upon this one idea of unity. But as we have seen in the same country, there were other minds, the Buddhistic, who could not find that unity anywhere. To them, all truth was a mass of variation. There was no connection between one thing and another. I remember a story told by Professor Max Muller in one of his books, an old Greek story of how a Brahmin visited Socrates in Athens. The Brahmin asked, "What is the highest knowledge?" And Socrates answered, "To know man is the end and aim of all knowledge." "But how can you know man without knowing God?" replied the Brahmin. The one side, the Greek side, which is represented by modern Europe, insisted upon the knowledge of man. The Indian side, mostly represented by the old religions of the world, insisted upon the knowledge of God. The one sees God in nature, and the other sees nature in God. To us, at the present time perhaps, has been given the privilege of standing aside from both these aspects and taking an impartial view of the whole. This is a fact that variation exists, and so it must, if life is to be. This is also a fact that in and through these variations, unity must be perceived. This is a fact that God is perceived in nature, but it is also a fact that nature is perceived in God. The knowledge of man is the highest knowledge, and only by knowing man can we know God. This is also a fact that the knowledge of God is the highest knowledge, and knowing God alone we can know man. Apparently contradictory though these statements may appear, they are the necessity of human nature. The whole universe is a play of unity in variety, and of variety in unity. The whole universe is a play of differentiation and oneness. The whole universe is a play of the finite in the infinite. We cannot take one without granting the other, but we cannot take them both as facts of the same perception, as facts of the same experience. Yet, in this way it will always go on. Therefore, coming to our more particular purpose, which is religion rather than ethics, a state of things where all variation has died down, giving place to a uniform, dead homogeneity, is impossible so long as life lasts. Nor is it desirable. At the same time, there is the other side of the fact, which is that this unity already exists. That is the peculiar claim, not that this unity has to be made, but that it already exists, and that you could not perceive the variety at all without it. God is not to be made, but He already exists. This has been the claim of all religions. Whenever one has perceived the finite, he has also perceived the infinite. Some laid stress on the finite side and declared that they perceived the finite without. Others laid stress on the infinite side and declared they perceived the infinite only. But we know that it is a logical necessity that we cannot perceive the one without the other. So the claim is that this sameness, this unity, this perfection, as we may call it, is not to be made. It already exists and is here. We have only to recognize it, to understand it, whether we know it or not, whether we can express it in clear language or not, whether this perception assumes the force and clearness of a sense perception or not. It is there. For we are bound by the logical necessity of our minds to confess that it is there, else the perception of the finite would not be. I am not speaking of the old theory of substance and qualities, but of oneness. That in the midst of all this mass of phenomena, the very fact of the consciousness that you and I are different brings to us, at the same moment, the consciousness that you and I are not different. Knowledge would be impossible without that unity. Without the idea of sameness, there would be neither perception nor knowledge. So both run side by side. Therefore, the absolute sameness of conditions, if that be the aim of ethics, appears to be impossible. That all men should be the same could never be, however we might try. Men will be born differentiated. Some will have more power than others. Some will have natural capacities, others not. Some will have perfect bodies, others not. We can never stop that. At the same time, ring in our ears the wonderful words of morality proclaimed by various teachers. Thus, seeing the same God equally present in all, the sage does not injure self by the self, and thus reaches the highest goal. Even in this life, they have conquered relative existence whose minds are firmly fixed on this sameness. For God is pure, and God is the same to all. Therefore, such are said to be living in God. We cannot deny that this is the real idea, yet at the same time comes the difficulty that the sameness as regards external forms and position can never be attained. But what can be attained is elimination of privilege. That is really the work before the whole world. In all social lives, there has been that one fight in every race and in every country. The difficulty is not that one body of men are naturally more intelligent than another, but whether this body of men, because they have the advantage of intelligence, should take away even physical enjoyment from those who do not possess that advantage. The fight is to destroy that privilege, that some will be stronger physically than others, and will thus naturally be able to subdue or defeat the weak, is a self evident fact. But that because of this strength they should gather unto themselves all the attainable happiness of this life is not according to law, and the fight has been against it. That some people, through natural aptitude, should be able to accumulate more wealth than others is natural, but that on account of this power to acquire wealth, they should tyrannize and ride roughshod over those who cannot acquire so much wealth is not a part of the law, and the fight has been against that. The enjoyment of advantage over another is privilege, and throughout ages, the aim of morality has been its destruction. This is the work which tends towards sameness, towards unity, without destroying variety. Let all these variations remain eternally. It is the very essence of life. We shall all play in this way, eternally. You will be wealthy, and I shall be poor. You will be strong, and I shall be weak. You will be learned, and I ignorant. You will be spiritual, and I less so. But what of that? Let us remain so. But because you are physically or intellectually stronger, you must not have more privilege than I, and that you have more wealth is no reason why you should be considered greater than I, for that sameness is here, in spite of the different conditions. The work of ethics has been, and will be in the future, not the destruction of variation and the establishment of sameness in the external world, which is impossible for it, would bring death and annihilation, but to recognize the unity in spite of all these variations, to recognize the God within, in spite of everything that frightens us, to recognize that infinite strength as the property of everyone in spite of all apparent weakness, and to recognize the eternal, infinite, essential purity of the soul in spite of everything to the contrary that appears on the surface. This we have to recognize. Taking one side alone, one half only of the position, is dangerous and liable to lead to quarrels. We must take the whole thing as it is, stand on it as our basis, and work it out in every part of our lives, as individuals and as unit members of society.